Welcome to Jewish Cinematheque, a monthly opportunity to meet with some of the important faces involved with films that tackle the Jewish experience. In each program, we will interface with writers, directors, and actors who have helped create new cinematic works, some here, some in Israel, and some from around the globe. Today we meet Manfred Kirchheimer, the writer, director, and producer of the new documentary film, My Coffee with Jewish Friends. Kirchheimer, an accomplished documentarian and recently retired professor of film at New York's School of the Visual Arts, went out and interviewed an array of friends across New York to get their views on Jewish life and Judaism. Manny, welcome.
Thank you.
I must tell you, the film just was delightful. How did you decide to just move forward and make this film? You've made a whole variety of films over the course of your lifetime, and now at this point in this stage in your life, why did you go this way?
I don't know. That is, many years ago, when I was teaching at a different school, there was a 2-hour break every week for activities. And a woman teacher there started a new group about Jewishness. And she asked everybody how they felt about being Jewish. And I was at a loss. I felt very Jewish, but I had no idea what to say in answer to that question. And then when in 2014, when I wanted to make a new film, I had finished making a film called Canners about people picking up cans and bottles for a nickel on the street.
People in New York?
Yes. Brooklyn, Upper West Side. And I wondered what film I'd make next. I looked at a list of things I had compiled over the years about films I wanted to make, and that one struck me. That I really wanted to make a film in which I asked people about their Jewishness. So.
And you decided to go to people who you knew, or some strangers, or what was the approach you took?
Yes, I decided to. I had a variety of friends, and this didn't nearly cover those friends. As a matter of fact, in the new film I'm making, I used people only who were not in the Jewish film, and they're also friends. But I decided on a list of about 20, and they were all good friends, and I knew there was a variety, and I tried to get a variety in age as well. And so I set it up.
The people you had on camera were writers, poets, filmmakers. I mean, and you wanted to represent a broad swath of Jewish life, of Jewish approaches, of orthodoxy, of Reform Judaism. I mean, what were you hoping to accomplish?
Well, I knew I needed that kind of variety, you know, and also in age. I had 4 students of mine at a certain point, but I also had people as old as I am in the film. And also, I had people in between. And I knew that Israel was going to be a topic. And I knew that the synagogue was going to be a topic. And I knew that other manifestations of Jewish life were going to be topics. And so I chose these people because I knew them well enough to know that there was a variety of opinions among them.
And each of them was Jewish, although I remember that there was a young boy named Levi.
Yes, who was not Jewish. And I didn't know that until it happened on camera. That
Wow.
was actual, in which I wanted to know about his being brought up Jewish, and it turns out his mother wasn't. His father was, but I think his father converted to Protestantism. And yes, and that surprised me. But also, Tom Hurwitz, the film cameraman, was only half Jewish, and he's a deacon now at St. John's the Divine. His father was Jewish.
His father was?
Leo Hurwitz,
Who was the famous,
famous filmmaker
who had been blacklisted.
who had been blacklisted for a time, yes. And he himself was very political, Tom is. And however, his mother was the dancer Jane Dudley, who was Protestant, and he secretly veered towards that side, even from the time when he was a child.
You know, in the film, you had your various people that you were interviewing telling incredible stories. He told a story about being advised not to be religious, which made him, if anything, more religious later on. I mean, so you've been doing this a long time. You teach film. How do you draw out these stories from the people you interview?
Well, I guess somebody said to me the other day that I'm patient. And I guess I do a lot of waiting on camera while people talk. Even though in this film, it's not so much an interview film as it is a discussion film. But I wait until I enter the picture. And I think everybody has a story to tell. And so did these people. So did Tom. You know, he starts out telling about his aunt in the teens of the 20th century, going to Catholic classes and being told we don't do God in our family. And then later in the 90s, on her deathbed, he helped her see a priest and convert. So, you know, you have to wait out these stories, but then you know enough about the people to shift to another story that you know about them and to let them tell it. Like there's another couple in the film that is half Jewish, half Protestant, right? The Grinbergs. And I asked her about that, and there was this big, big, big moment of silence that I decided not to interrupt because, you know, you can always cut out the silences when you edit a film. So with that in mind, she then talked about her own life, being suicidal at 17, but that she no longer believed in God. So, I don't know, I tend to find ways, although I must say, in my latest film, I'm not as successful. I don't think I haven't edited it yet. So I've got 24 people or so, and I hope I can make a film out of it.
Well, you know, in my coffee with Jewish friends, you are very much present. You know, sometimes you'll see a film and the person asking the questions, the director, will be off camera and you'll never ever see them. And you were very present, often adding a sort of a light or comical edge to it to soften some of the deep philosophical questions that you throw at them. Is this a new approach that you took with this particular film? Had you ever done it before? And as a professor of film, is this different, or were you modeling this after someone else's approach?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, there was My Dinner with Andre. See, I tend, in my dozen or so films, I tend to go from a talking heads film.
Let me just stop you for a second. Explain what Talking Heads is for the audience, because they may not know what
all
that
right,
means.
yes. In my lifetime, there was a big change in the 1950s of filmmaking, in which documentaries began to talk out of the mouth synchronously. Until then, things were shot MOS, without sound, right? Which is an official film term based on directors of the 1930s who came from Germany.
The Exiles.
Right, who would say, now this scene is without sprechen, without talking. And that became MOS, without speech. And so documentaries, because of the difficulty of getting live sound, would be shot silently. Sounds would be added later, and in lieu of dialogue, there would be voiceover narrations. Right? In the 50s, all that changed. Right? And Leo Hurwitz was a pioneer in that, together with Fonzie and Nelly. In 1951, they made a film called Emergency Ward, in which they went into an emergency ward. I think it was either St. Clair's. Yeah, and they filmed, well-known, not Hurwitz, Fonzie and Nelly filmed all night long with the denizens of the emergency ward. He gave it to Leo to edit, and that was the first film that utilized this technique.
And this made a major impact on you as a young
Well,
filmmaker.
it made a major, it did not right away, because that was 1951. I was just getting into the industry. And my first film was Colossus on the River, which I didn't make till 1965. And it was shot MOS with a narrator. So that made a big impact on people like Ricky Leacock, D.A. Pennybaker, and the Maisel brothers, and Robert Drew. It made a big impact on them, and eventually even on Lester, who made the Beatles films.
But getting back to you, this approach in this film is really a result of just your evolution and trying different things each time you make a film?
Yes. And as I say, I was determined to try an approach which I hadn't tried before, which was going to be to make a talking heads, film without B-roll. That is, without interruption of any other illustrative material. And that was based on My Dinner with Andre, in which two people sat in a restaurant and talked for an hour and a half, right? And as a matter of fact, Wally joined the discussion. So I said to myself, you know, I also have a story to tell about when I was Orthodox. And so I decided to join the discussion in every case, not to do interviews, but to be part of the discussion.
And that's what makes this film so powerful and so poignant. It's just, it's beautiful. And you could also see the relationship you have with your friends. I mean, the respect and the love the love they have for you, and just in terms of the discussion that takes place. Let's pause here for a second and just take a look at one film clip from My Coffee with Jewish Friends.
Hey, Gil.
Hey, Manny.
We've been friends a long time.
Almost 50 years. So in all these years that we know each other, we've never spoken about this.
I was going to say that. You're taking the words out of my mouth.
I told my father that, that he was coming down the stairs. And I told him I met this wonderful, wonderful girl. He said, "What's her name?" And I said, "B. Messina." He fainted dead away right on the stairs.
Did he really?
Absolutely. He just went down, right down.
Women and men should be equal. They shouldn't be separated.
Orthodox in the synagogue, the women sit in a different place behind the mechitza.
In some synagogues, they sit like in a second level.
In a second
Yeah.
level so that the men can't see them, right? This is all about sex, Rob.
I've never had it
In
before.
case you're not interested.
One of the reasons I'm Jewish is that I cannot betray my grandparents. I cannot betray the millions who came before that, who were murdered. And for me not to be Jewish would mean a betrayal of those people.
So I grew up modern Orthodox and I went to Jewish school all my life. I decided to leave because of the feeling of being a Jew and a gay Jew in Paris was difficult in this modern Orthodox community.
I love being with my wife in synagogue, okay?
And do you love him enough to go to synagogue?
I go on occasions when my arm is twisted or when there is an occasion like somebody's being bar bat mitzvahed. I mean, even, you can say man caused the Holocaust. Nevertheless, if my children were about to do something that I thought was terrible, I would have stopped them. So if we are God's children, why didn't he stop the Nazis? Why didn't he stop the Khmer Rouge? Why didn't he stop the slaughter in the African countries?
Israel is really important to me, and I think that especially, I don't think it's lost on you that there has to be somewhere for Jews to be and for there to be a homeland.
I don't think it's black and white, Manny. I think there's shadings, and I think there's subtleties to it. The founding of the state, it seemed like such a joyous event, seemed like a country of such high ideals that it made the desert bloom, that it took in people who were persecuted. It gave a homeland to people who had no homeland, who were slaughtered just because of who they were. So along with that goes terrible kind of pain when they do things that seem unworthy.
No, I have a better solution. That the Jews get the West Bank and the Palestinians get the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
We're back with Manfred Kirchheimer. The film is My Coffee with Jewish Friends. Let's take a look at who you are and where you came from. Your family escaped Nazi Germany before the war in the late 30s, I think 1937. 1936.
Yes.
You came to New York. Clearly you didn't speak English. What impact did that have on your life, your career? And then you subsequently made one of the wonderful films about the German Jewish community.
We Were So Beloved.
We Were So Beloved.
Yes.
Can you talk about that, being a young immigrant coming to this country, and how that affected your politics, your approach to filmmaking, and your own, political beliefs?
Didn't take me long to learn English. I was 5 years old, and after a half a year, I think I spoke it fluently as I do today, I hope. Well, I think the first impact it had was when I was at City College, believe it or not, and there was a riot going on. Well, they called it a riot. It wasn't a riot. It was a protest against an anti-Semitic and an anti-black professor, two professors, Knickerbocker and Davis, 1949. And I was in line protesting when I saw this guy with a camera shooting from the back of a police horse. And I went up to him, I said, "What are you doing this for?" And he said, "I'm doing it as part of the Film Institute." So there was the first documentary film institute at City College, the first one in the country.
They called City College the Harvard of New York.
Did they? Well, anyway, the head of it was Hans Richter, an emigre German Dadaist. who I'd never heard of, and who I've only found out last year was half Jewish. I didn't know that. Anyway, I went up to Professor Richter, prompted by my father, and I went into Army Hall where he was sitting at his desk, and I said, Professor, are there any opportunities in film? And he says, yeah, opportunities, yeah, plenty, but no jobs. Well, he was wrong. There were plenty of jobs, but very few opportunities. And, but we formed a relationship, and I think it was partly because we were both German. And I later was able to negative edit his two latest films, 8 by 8 and A Passionate Pastime.
When you say negative edit, you were using negative film.
I was using, it was reversal film.
Okay.
So there was no negative, but there was original. And he had edited these films, and I was matching his edit to, or rather I was matching the original material to his edit.
And this was your early training.
This was part of my early training.
And then you became, what, an editor?
Then I became an editor in the industry, yes, for 24 years.
Wow.
I did camera work, I did a little directing, and I did some writing. And after 24 years, I left the industry to become a teacher.
And in the midst of this, you decided to deal with your upbringing in Washington Heights, New York, in the German Jewish community. And why did you decide to make a film about that experience?
Well, not so fast.
Oh, I'm
Eric.
ahead of myself, okay.
Yes, well, first I made 5 other films.
Okay.
And they were all shorts. One of them was 30 minutes, one of them was 45 minutes, however, Stations of the Elevated. And then the next film, yes, was We Were So Beloved. And I had been trying for a long time to get funding for that film. And I finally did get my first, on my, I don't know, 30th try or something. First I got on my 21st try, I got funding for Stations of the Elevated. Then I tried again for the architecture film, which I made later because I didn't get funding.
That was
for
about
it.
Louis Sullivan.
That was about Louis Sullivan. Yes, and then but I had wanted to make a film about my people because I was dismayed because they voted for Nixon. But the evolution of that film, We Were So Beloved, was interesting because even though I went with a chip on my shoulder, I realized that wasn't fair and that I had to show them in Germany before they got here. And then when they got here and formed this wonderful community that I grew out of in Washington Heights. And then beyond that. So I made that film, and that was a 2.5-hour film. That was my first feature. And I'm very proud of that one.
And you should be. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Jumping ahead, here you are dealing with Jews, talking about a variety of questions. You talk about anti-Semitism, you talk about Judaism, you talk about religion, you talk about prayer, and you talk about Israel. Was there any point in the course of making the film that you felt that you maybe were treading too far? I mean, you had a couple of people with some very clear, we could call them possibly bigoted opinions about different things.
Well, I knew that when I chose them. Look, one guy is my dentist. and we talk about the Mets when we see each other, when I visit him. Right? That's all we talk about.
Because you want to stay away from politics.
Well, yeah, pretty much, because there were hints. And I knew what his approach was going to be. And the other one, Yossi Bums, who just moved to Florida you know, and it comes out in the film that he's going to move to Florida instead of back to Israel.
He's Israeli.
He's Israeli.
But he doesn't want to live in Israel when he retired. He wanted to move to Florida.
He wanted to move, and he has. He has moved, I believe, to Coral Gables.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting. I don't usually make friends of bigots or of people who I'm so opposed to. But somehow, he's a brilliant guy, and somehow, over the years, we see each other once a year or so. We've remained friends. And so I knew what I was getting into. And I was prepared for it. And so I don't think, somebody asked me at a screening the other day how I could stand to interview him, and why didn't I make it plain to him that I couldn't stand him? And I said, well, I wanted him to remain in the film. You know, you gotta use some tact, and at the same time formulate your own position.
There's a great moment in the film where you look at him and he says, you know, I don't want to say anymore. And you say, you know, bring it out. You know, it's okay. And amazingly, he does.
Yes, he does. He says,
wow,
to the Palestinians.
Crazy.
Yes. And it's a shocking moment, and there were others that I left out. My wife, who was my strongest critic, you know, I had 4 or 5 instances of his doing things like that. And she said, look, it's enough. People get it about him. And so I took certain things out. But I'm now negotiating with my distributor to do some extras on the DVD.
That would be a lot of fun.
And I would put in certain things that are left out of the film proper.
You brought in a couple. He's a synagogue goer. She doesn't want to go. They've been married 60 years, and they sit there and they sort of bicker between each other, and it's just so beautiful, and you just want to hug the two of them. You chose to bring in a female rabbi.
Yes.
To talk about religion.
The one person who was not a friend. I didn't know her. She was recommended.
And the reason why you decided to invite her?
Well, because she's female, she's a lesbian, you know, and I thought that was going to be interesting for the film, to have that kind of variety. I also have 2 doctors, one of them is mine, who are husbands, right, to each other.
Strong lovers of Israel.
And strong lovers of Israel, yes.
Powerful. Just such a wonderful film. I wish we could talk for hours. The film is called My Coffee with Jewish Friends. Try and catch it. It is now playing in New York City and hopefully will be coming to your neighborhood theaters. My guest today, Manfred Kirchheimer, really a delight for me. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Eric, for having me.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.